Hey everyone, I'm Mark, and today we're going to continue to look at how to talk to BeyondATC throughout a flight. So if you haven't seen the first part yet, where we got our clearance, you'll definitely want to check that out first. We're picking it back up right where we left off. We've done all of the prep for our flight from Victoria out to Kelowna, and we're coming up on the whole short line for the runway. The takeoff and the initial climb are the busiest part of any flight, and when you add in ATC, it's even busier. So to reduce our workload, we're going to make sure our radios are set up properly. I've already got the tower tuned into the active frequency, and what's going to happen after takeoff is we'll be handed off to departure, which will cover us for most of the climb to our cruise altitude. We look over at the BeyondATC window after the tower. There would normally be a departure frequency listed here, but it's showing an approach frequency instead, which is a little bit strange, but I suspect this is the frequency they're going to hand us off to anyways, so I'm going to set 125.45 as the standby frequency in the radio.
All aircraft be advised information Quebec now current, altimeter 29905.
Alright, so there was a little ATIS update there that we weren't expecting, but whenever you hear one of those, the only thing I really make sure of is that my altimeter is set correctly. So she said 29.95, so we can adjust that quickly here. Now before you call for takeoff, make sure you're truly ready to go and all your checklist items are done, like turning on the landing lights, setting your trim, or even extending the flaps, because you really want everything ready when they clear you to go. We can go ahead and do that now since we're all set up, and our message is going to be in the same format as what we saw in the previous video. So you say who you're calling first, who you are, and finally what your request is.
Victoria Tower, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima at runway 09, request departure.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Victoria Tower, wind 075 at 4, fly heading 090, runway 09er, cleared for takeoff.
Cleared for takeoff, runway 09 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Alright, so with that out of the way, we'll get moving here, and this really kicks off the most high workload part of the flight, on top of having to do a fair bit of radio communications. What I actually suggest for your first few flights, because you can feel overwhelmed pretty quickly, is to turn the auto tune and the auto respond checkboxes to on if you haven't already. That basically delegates the responsibility of the radios to your first officer, which is a great way to free you up a bit more to concentrate on the flying. Until they call you again though, you can focus on flying the plane, and usually pretty quickly into your initial climb, they'll call you and transfer you over to the departure frequency.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, contact Victoria Terminal departure 125.45.
Over to 125.45 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Once you've acknowledged the handoff, you can switch over to the new frequency, which you should theoretically already have in your radios, and we're going to contact them now.
Victoria departure, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, passing through 3,100 feet.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Victoria Terminal departure, identified, climb to 13,000 feet, altimeter 29905.
Climb to 13,000 feet for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
This part of the flight is already pretty busy just flying the plane, but when you add in ATC, things are even harder to keep up with, so we're gonna unpack all of these communications in just a second once things settle down.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, turn left, heading 030.
Left 030 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Alright, so things should be a bit quieter now, so we can go through those comms that we just had and clarify a few things about what you just heard. When I first contacted the departure frequency, I used the same pattern as usual, so who I'm contacting, who I am, and for my status, I said that we were passing through 3,000 feet. We're going to do the same thing all the way up to our cruise altitude and then on the way down as well. And if we were flying straight and level, what we could have said instead, for example, is level at 3,000 feet instead. Their response told us to climb to 13,000 feet, and what you might have seen me do is first adjust the altitude on the autopilot panel and then respond back to them, which just makes it a little bit easier to remember what they told you. Shortly after that, they told us to turn to 030, and if you remember back in the previous video when we got our clearance, they said that they would give us vectors to our first waypoint, which is what they're doing right there. We're not quite on a heading to our first fix though, which is the Watcom VOR, but for now we'll continue to fly on the heading they told us until they tell us otherwise. Definitely keep an eye on your route though when you're being vectored around, although it's less of a problem on the departure. Sometimes the vectoring can be a little bit off and send you further out than you really need to go. What you can try if you do end up in that situation is to ask the controller to go direct to your waypoint, but it doesn't always work. So in that case, you can just ignore BeyondATC and it'll usually recover as you continue through the flight.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, cleared direct Watcom. Resume own navigation.
Cleared direct Watcom, resume own navigation for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Alright, so you heard what they said there. Now what that means for us is that we can go into our flight plan and we're going to tell it to go direct to Watcom, which will make the autopilot start going directly there, and then we'll just follow the rest of our flight plan from there all the way to our destination.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, contact Seattle Center 125.1.
Contact Seattle Center 125.1 for 5 Kilo Lima.
Alright, so we've just been handed off from the departure frequency to the center frequency, which generally takes care of the airspace above 18,000 feet, but as you can see, they transferred us a little bit early here.
Seattle Center, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, passing through 12,200.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Seattle Center, climb maintain flight level 270.
Climb and maintain 270 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Unless you're doing a very short flight, you'll likely be handed off from one center to the next while you're at cruise, so if you're planning on stepping away for a bit, make sure that you've given your co-pilot the power to respond and tune the radio for you. If for whatever reason you think you've missed a handoff, you can always go check the comms history by closing the frequencies window to see what they said when they transferred you over, so there's always a way to get back up to date. There are other types of requests you can make to BeyondATC as you're going through your flight as well, and one pretty common one is to change your cruise altitude, especially if you're getting bounced around a lot or there's some weather that you weren't expecting. The other options that you see in the menu on the bottom left are more related to your approach, so we're going to look at those as we descend towards Kelowna a bit later in the video. Alright, so we're well into the cruise now, and I skipped one handoff in the middle there since they're all pretty much the same, but we're coming up on our top of descent now, so we should get our arrival clearance soon. The details that will actually be in that clearance can vary based on where you're flying, but most of the time you'll get an arrival procedure as well as a runway for landing, which can match what you filed in SimBrief, but if the weather's changed, it can be different.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Vancouver Center, expect Piglet 5, runway 34.
We'll expect the Piglet 5 for arrival runway 34 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
When you're accepting the clearance, you want to make sure that you've read back the entire thing. So for this one, it was the arrival procedure and the runway, because otherwise they're going to ask you to confirm the details that you've missed. The next thing, of course, is you'll want to jump into your flight plan and either confirm that it matches what you loaded originally or change it out for the new clearance that you were given. The same goes for the approach and the runway, but since it only gave us the runway to expect here, I'd leave the approach as is for now until we get confirmation on what we'll actually be doing, and that should come soon as well. Also keep an eye on your top of descent because they can be a bit slow with their descent instructions, and at the end of the day you're responsible for descending on time to hit any restrictions along the way.
Vancouver Center, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, ready for descent.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Piglet 5, runway 34, descend to 8,000 feet, altimeter 3000.
Descend to 8,000 feet, altimeter 3000, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
When you're given instructions to descend via an arrival procedure like we were here with the Piglet 5, you'll want to have the chart handy to be able to see the altitude restrictions that you need to comply with on your way down. For example, here we need to cross Piglet at a max of 210 knots and AMBAT at 8,000 feet precisely, so these are things that they won't tell you over the radio, but they expect you to comply with. If your route doesn't include an arrival procedure, they'll likely just give you an instruction with an altitude that you need to descend to by, but in either case, you're the one who's responsible for descending on time to comply with those restrictions. The other thing that's completely up to you is which autopilot mode you use to descend with. So long as you hit any of the restrictions that you need to, ATC is not going to care how you do it. It's whatever makes the most sense for you. The other thing that you can typically do once you're about 60 to 80 miles out is pick up the ATC for your destination. So if you haven't already, it's going to be time to click on the airport at the top right here to see all of the frequencies that you'll need on your way down. The reason it's important to get the ATC from BeyondATC rather than just relying on your plane's tablet or any other tool for that matter is that there can be differences between what Flight Sim, the real world, and what BeyondATC are reporting. That's because all of these tools and even Flight Sim use different data sources for things like the weather forecast and the runway preferences based on those conditions, and that can often result in differences with the active runway, so it's always worth checking on. The other option, if you're still out of range, is that you can also ask the controller for the weather at your destination, but it won't include things like the active runway, but it can at least give you an idea of what's going on.
Vancouver Center, what's the weather at Kelowna, CYLW?
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Vancouver Center. Weather at Kelowna is wind 075 at 4 knots. Visibility 9 miles. Temperature 29 degrees. QNH 3000. Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima. Contact Vancouver Center 133.5.
Over to Vancouver Center on 133.5 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima. Vancouver Center, good afternoon. Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, passing through 16,000 feet.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Vancouver Center, radar contact. Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, altimeter 3000, expect the RN80 Yankee runway tree 4 with the AMBAT transition.
All right, we'll expect runway 34 RNAV with the MBAT transition, and the altimeter is 3000 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
That's our procedure that we were waiting to hear about, so we now know that we're landing on the RNAV Yankee to 34, so at this point we can go back into our flight plan and make sure that that's all set up properly. There can sometimes be discrepancies between what BeyondATC gives you and what's available in the GPS, and I had to dig around a fair bit here to realize that I was actually looking for the RNAV Alpha, which is effectively the same procedure. They told us to use the AMBAT transition, so that's what I picked, and what you'll want to do is load the procedure, but you won't activate it right away since we need to stay on the arrival procedure for now until they clear us for the approach. At this point though, it's really just a matter of prepping the plane like you normally would, so slowing down, descending, turning landing lights on, and so on. Normally around here is where you'd be handed off from the center frequency to an approach frequency, but because this is a relatively small airport with not much traffic, there is no approach frequency, so the next handoff is gonna be to the tower.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, cleared direct AMBAT. Cross AMBAT at or above 8,000 feet. Cleared RN80 Yankee runway tree 4.
Maintain 8,000 feet, cleared for the approach, RNAV Yankee 34 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, contact Kelowna Tower 119.6, bye-bye.
Over to tower on 119.6 for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
Alright, so we can go direct to AMBAT now, which we're basically already doing, so it doesn't really change much, and we have to cross it at exactly 8,000 feet like the procedure chart told us, and then from there we're cleared to fly the RNAV approach to the runway. If you're busy configuring the plane for the approach when they hand you off to the tower, just remember that there's always the option to have the first officer respond for you, but it's obviously more fun to do the radio calls yourself.
Kelowna Tower, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima on the RNAV 34, crossing 7,800 feet.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, Kelowna Tower, wind tree 25 and 12, gusts 17, runway tree 4 clear to land.
Clear to land, runway 34, Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
With that out of the way though, you're all set to focus on your approach, and you just have to keep your ears open in case they ask you to go around for whatever reason. Shortly after you're back on the ground, they'll ask you to exit the runway at a specific taxiway, but sometimes it's a bit hard to tell where that is just by looking at it, so it's always a good idea to have your charts open for the airport.
Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima, exit left at Bravo.
We'll exit left at Bravo for Charlie Mike 5 Kilo Lima.
As we get off the runway, they'll transfer us to the ground frequency, and your last interaction with BeyondATC is to get your taxi instructions to the ramp. That's all there is to flying with BeyondATC though, and if you learned something useful today, please make sure to like the video and subscribe on your way out.